Hey guys, Akil here. Welcome back to the Trading Coach Podcast. Today, we're going to talk about scaring yourself into success and why most people don't follow through with their goals. Now, before we get started, two things. One, this is another video episode, so if you want to see me and all the cool things that I add to the video, make sure you head over to a platform that shows the video version. I know Spotify does so, YouTube obviously does so as well. And two, make sure you make the Trading Coach Podcast a part of your regular routine. Yes, you can use this podcast in 1,000+ episodes as like an encyclopedia, meaning if you want a specific topic, just type in Trading Coach Podcast and blah, 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 and you should be able to get an episode that discusses that topic. But also understand that a lot of these episodes do follow up on previous episodes, whether it's inside jokes or just past discussions. So if you can, make sure you listen to them, maybe not in order from episode 1, but whenever you start, try to be consistent about listening/watching to this podcast if you want to get the most of it. So it is the beginning of the new year, and we are right around that time when people stop doing the things that they were all excited about doing. Yes, it is National or International Quitting Day. International Quitting Day. You didn't know that was a thing, did you, right? Well, International Quitting Day is this, right? End of December, January 1st, we all have these goals, these New Year's resolutions where we say we're going to do this, we're going to do that, and we get all fired up about doing it. And then usually it's like the second Friday of the month, we kind of stop doing the things that we were all excited about doing and go back to doing the things that we did the previous year. I used to work in a gym, so we would see this in the gym all the time where, we'd be hammered to like sell memberships the first 2 weeks of January, and everything would be crowded and crazy and annoying because the people that were regulars couldn't get to their normal machines or do their normal routines. And I would just say like, hey, just wait 2 weeks, like 80% of these people that are in here are never going to come again. And that's typically what happens. Unfortunately, we see the same thing in trading as well, where I work with a lot of traders closely. I work with a lot of traders kind of not closely, but through like podcasts and just social media where they reach out and they share with me their goals and how they're doing. And I try to be as positive as possible. But unfortunately, what ends up happening is year after year, I get the same message from the same people. And it's like, well, I thought last year you said you were going to do this and you never did that. And it's the same deal. They start off hot for like the first 2 weeks, and then they go back into their same old routine, and they end the next year with the same old results, and they make the same New Year's resolutions, and then they do it for 2 weeks, and then the cycle repeats itself until eventually you quit or die. Sorry to be morbid, but that's just the reality, right? A lot of us don't follow through. So let's talk about why we don't follow through. And one of the main reasons is this. We're not setting goals with the right motivation. Now, what do you mean by the right motivation? Well, there are two things that typically motivate us or push us into doing things. Push it real good, right? It is pain and pleasure. And typically, most people make goals off of pleasure. My first trading goal was off of pleasure. I was speaking to a trader on the platform the other day about what did you think? What did you think about when you first started trading and blah, 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 blah. And I said, well, my goal was I was going to make $1 million in 5 years, right? And I had this pleasurable dream about how I would have $1 million and I'd be trading on a beach, sipping martinis and all this fun stuff like you see in the movies or in your fantasies. And that's what was supposed to like drive me to be successful. And it was good for like a few weeks or a few months, and then I forgot all about it and I went back to kind of being unmotivated and doing the things that I was doing before. So what I'm trying to say is that when we create goals based off of pleasure, it's a good kind of, start of the fire, but eventually that fire dies out because there's only so much we can add to that pleasurable type of goal. It's a dream, and then we wake up from it and then we don't do anything else. The other type of motivational factor is pain, and pain is a lot stronger than pleasure. I've done podcast episodes in the past where we've talked about positive procrastination and how me personally in a few different ways, I am at my best when I procrastinate. So going back to like when I was in college, right? The teacher at the beginning of the month, the teacher would give us a report and be like, or an assignment. And they'd be like, hey, this report is due at the end of the month. You have a whole month to do it, blah, 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 blah. And in my mind, I'm like, I'm going to do it on day 1. And then I start gaming. I'm going to do it on day 2. And I start listening to music. I'm going to do it on day 3. And pretty much I wouldn't do it until it was like 2 days before it was due. And then 2 days before it was due, it was like, oh man, if I don't do this, I'm probably going to fail. And that's when I started getting scared and the pain of like failure took over, and I would do my best. The same thing in my trading journey where, again, I quit 3 jobs. A lot of people think I quit 3 jobs because I was just crazy or insane, right? Or overconfident. There's a little bit of overconfidence in there too. But the main reason was that I was very comfortable working my 3 jobs. At the time, it was making me a good amount of money. I was in a pleasurable place of life. I knew that as long as I stayed there, I would never do the things that I needed to do to be successful at trading. So I put myself, and again, I never recommend anyone do this because it was dumb, but this is just me knowing myself. I put myself in a position where I had to put my back against the wall. I had a financial time limit. I had to do the things that I wasn't comfortable doing. I had to stick with them or else it wasn't going to work. I got one more story. I had a friend of mine, unfortunately, he had a health scare where the doctors told him he almost died. And this is a bigger friend and not necessarily living the most healthy of lives. And he changed completely. And then, I saw him. He didn't tell anybody about the health scare, but we saw him. We're like, man, you lost a lot of weight. You're looking good, man. Like, what are you doing? Like, give me the secret. And he's like, well, I had this health scare. I almost died. And like, I had to change the way I ate and worked out. I'm like, what? And he's like, yeah, it was necessarily that it was not, and we told him like to do this stuff many years. But he's like, when they told me I could die or I was close to dying, that was it. I understood that I needed to make that change because that pain of knowing that I can die and a mom can lose a son and we can lose our friend was more motivating than anything else, right? So what I'm trying to say is that although pleasure may start the fire, following through for our goals has to be an emotional attachment to it. And there's no bigger emotional attachment than pain, than fear, right? And there's nothing wrong with letting yourself scare yourself into success. So how can we go about doing it? Well, I want to refer to a really old book that I used to read that really got me started. I spoke about it in a previous podcast about affirmations and neural pathways and all this stuff. It was a book by Tony Robbins called Awaken the Giant Within. I should have it somewhere right here. And I remember we did this with a lot of traders for a long time. When we first started working with traders, I don't have the thing on it, I take it off, but you can see it kind of right there, perhaps. When we first started working with traders, I did this myself, we would do a trader assessment. And in that trader assessment, we would do a project called kind of Create Your Perfect Life. And what you would do is you would go through different aspects of your life. You would judge yourself of like where you were at 5 years ago, where you're currently at, and where you want to be at in the future. And again, this was based off of pleasure, where it's like, hey, I'm unhappy with where I'm at. In the future, I want to be a millionaire, right? And then over the years, you would kind of see how close you were to that goal. So I want to look at that same exercise, but do it in a different way. Instead of identifying like your perfect life, I want you to identify where your flaws at, and I want you to identify one area that you can use as that biggest fear, right? Because again, my fear was, getting to the point where I was serious with my girlfriend at the time. We were getting married, and it's like, hey, this $30,000 that I'm making from, these 3 odd jobs, that's not gonna cut it when we have a family. And that was kind of the fear that pushed me into really getting serious about it. So some of the different categories here are going to be this, right? We have physically, right? So this is a good example, like what I told my friend, like physically, how do you rate yourself in the goal? You rate yourself and you kind of provide a sentence describing it. So physically, mentally, emotionally, attractiveness, relationships, running out of fingers here, living environment, socially, spiritually, career-wise, whatever, and financially. Right? Those are kind of the 10 elements or the 10 elements that you want to judge yourself off of. What I want you to do is I want you to pick one of them. And I want you to pick the one that you are least happy about, the one that will create enough fear, enough pressure, enough pain, knowing that you're currently here and in the future that could get worse. And I want you to use that as your main motivating factor. So again, we'll use financially for an example because that's for most of you. Instead of thinking about, hey, I want to be a millionaire in 5 years, think about what you're going to miss out on if you don't change your financial situation. Are there trips that you want to go on that you can't do? Are there family members that you want to take care of that you're not able to? Are you currently in a job, or this would be career, I guess. Are you currently in a job that you hate and you don't really enjoy and you'd rather do something else, and you don't see yourself 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road being at this job, right? Use whatever that fear is, right, to create that emotional attachment to your goal to scare yourself into that success. If you hate the job you're at, but you don't see any way out of it, say, hey, my biggest fear is doing the same thing that I'm doing right now, living an unfulfilled life for 10 more years. Therefore, if I can get good at trading and create supplemental income, or maybe go full-time trading, whatever your goal may be, that's what's going to allow you to get out of that situation, right? Use that fear of being in a place that you don't want to be in to fuel that fire and keep that motivation going past the first 2 weeks of the year. The last thing I would add is this, right? When it comes to goal setting, it's not enough just to like say it, right? That's another reason that many people quit. They just say they're going to do something and then they just forget about it, right? I want you to take these few steps. One, I want you to think of it, obviously say it. I want you to attach an emotion to it. 3, I want you to write it down, right? Physically write it down. Write it down on a piece of paper first in a journal, then you can transfer it to a computer as well. I want you to speak it into existence. This is the affirmation thing, where every day when you wake up, right, tell yourself what your goal is, tell yourself how you're going to attack it. Tell yourself what happens if you don't get it, right? A few episodes ago, I shared a few kind of the philosophy part of my trading plan, and kind of that first paragraph, right? That's a very similar situation as this, where I read to myself each and every day why I deserve to be successful, why I have to be successful, what happens if I'm not successful. And those were just daily reminders, those affirmations that slowly help. I don't know why that's crazy, right? I guess you're crazy for doing this, right? Speaking to yourself in the mirror, that slowly help kind of change your brain's wiring into doing what you need to do, where it's not just kind of a thing, but now it's like a way of life. And then I want you to make it public, right? We know that when you make something public, you're much more likely to achieve it. You can make it public in many different ways. You can, tell a friend, right? Have an accountability partner, tell a significant other, tell your partner, right? You can do a social media post, right? That's a big one as well, where you put on social media, hey guys, by June 5th, right, I'm going to do X, Y, Z, right? And you can pin it to the top, and that way you put it out there and there's a little bit of pressure, because if social media loves anything, it loves picking on people. So someone's going to come out on June 5th and be like, hey, did you do what you were supposed to do? Right? Jason did this a couple years ago for his 40th birthday, where he put it out there. He's like, hey, by the time I turn 40, or before I turn 40, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. And then he had to do it throughout the year because he put it out there and he knew people were going to pick on him, right? So make it public. That is a massive motivator. And then once again, I mentioned this already, but add that emotion to it, right? Why? Why do you have to do it? What is the consequence of you not doing it? And preferably make it a painful based thing versus a pleasurable based thing. So before I leave, here's what I want you to do, right? As part of the making it public thing, leave a comment underneath this episode of the Trading Coach podcast, right? If you have a goal in mind, if you have something that you want to achieve, don't waste any time. Leave it public right now. That way I will see it. And if you don't do it, I will call you out on a future episode and shame you. But you also might find other people in this community that share the same goals. And who knows, you might be able to find an accountability partner that you can work with, or at least connect with throughout the year, to keep you guys on track. Now, before you go, hit that like button, subscribe, leave me a rating and a review if you haven't done so already. It's a massive help to the show. Also, if you want me to dive deeper into the goal setting, we kind of touched on it a little bit, but didn't dive too deep in, just let me know and I can do a future episode on that. As you know, the Trading Coach podcast is a podcast made for you, by you, by me, but by me as you, for what you want to hear. You get it, right? Just let me know and I'll make an episode of it, all right? See you guys next time.